So I work at RMIT University in Melbourne in Australia, and so I want to start by acknowledging the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations, whose unceded lands I live and work on there in Melbourne. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present. So as you all well know in this region and on your own regions, sports and physical activities such as swimming, surfing, mountain biking, kayaking, hiking, rock climbing, sailing, beach walking, they're all popular ways for people to access the many physical, mental and social health and wellbeing benefits of spending time outdoors and to develop relationships to local beaches, coasts, rivers, lakes, forests, hillsides and mountains. At the same time, there's no doubt that the environmental impact of sport's really significant, and Taylor's been talking about that earlier. And we see this in the production of sports clothing and equipment, in the destruction of 500-year-old forests in South Korea for a 3-day skiing event in the 2018 Winter Olympics, in how recreational mountain bikers shed tyre particles into the bush ecologies that the trail's meant to protect, and in the damage done to corals by the sunscreens that snorkelers, surfers and swimmers like me use. These impacts are linked to long-held critiques that for many recreational and outdoor and nature-based sports participants, oceans, lakes and forests and mountains, they're simply backgrounds against which we do our activities. But outdoor sports participants are often deeply concerned with the impacts that they and related industries have on the places that we do our activities. Not always, but often. So the focus of my research is in Australia on the coasts and oceans, and I research groups who swim over 1 kilometre pretty much every day and where surfers swim alone or together at various breaks, so not organised sport. And on these coasts, surfers have become visible advocates about environmental issues, including climate change, mining, development, offshore wind farms, they don't like those, and pollution. This activism isn't new. In the 70s and 80s, Sydney surfers were dealing with Bondi cigars, which is a pretty evocative euphemism for the sewage that floated into the beach from an outfall pipe. And intimate encounters with sewage and pollution have similarly seen swimmers become advocates for their water places, as you know, here in the UK. And ocean swimmers are growing in their activism in other coastal issues as well in Australia, such as beach access, shark management, and coastal retreat in the face of rising oceans. So the experience of immersion is really powerful in how swimmers and surfers come to care for places, communities and ecologies. Cliff Evers has described how surfers develop an acute embodied sense of connectivity to surf breaks. Like swimming, surfing doesn't just involve people, but it's more than human, and I'm quoting Cliff, dolphins, storms, driftwood, jellyfish, birds, fish, turtles, surfboards, shells and seaweed, they're all part of surfing. In her ocean swimming research, Shane Gould describes swimming as a form of body-water intra-animation. Kate Moles describes embodied subjective, social and environmental entanglements between swimmers, water, wetsuits, people and critters. She talks about that during a 10K swimming event, the Dart. Ronan Foley, he talks about watery accretions and traces of experiences, knowledges and memories. In my work, I think about swimming as a form of reorientation to self, to ways of moving, to places, ecologies, histories and relationships. Kim Satchell, an Australian scholar, his work expands on what these kinds of relationalities might affect, what they might produce, and he argues that immersive swimming and surfing and beach walking experiences and relationships open possibilities for an eco-politics of in-placed encounters and returns. That is, we can be moved by the places that move us. Kim Satchell's influenced by Australian ecofeminists such as Val Plumwood and Deborah Bird-Rose, who seek a way to disrupt enduring understandings of human nature separation that we maintain in philosophy, which characterise so much of the ways we live our lives. These scholars find ways to, and I quote Plumwood here, to resituate humans in ecological terms at the same time as we resituate non-humans in ethical and cultural terms. Yeah. This is Bondi. And Deborah Bird-Rose elaborates on that idea when she explains that to resituate the human in ecological terms is to overcome the idea that humans are outside of nature, while to resituate the non-human in ethical terms overcomes the idea that the non-human world is devoid of meaning, values and ethics other than those which we think we've bestowed upon it. The challenges that anthropocentric assumption, this idea challenges anthropocentric assumptions that humans are special, above or apart from other animals. So philosophically, we know that humans aren't separate from nature, but this knowledge isn't reflected in how we live our lives. So for example, this enduring ideology has justified extractive and polluting practices, justifies shark management measures like culls and nets. It is evident in our willingness to talk of colonising Mars, of Earth's moon, and our willingness to drown out the stars with connectivity delivering satellites. In practice, we continue to develop policies and to imagine futures in which people are protected from environmental impacts of climate change. We build walls, we invent technologies, we kill creatures to ensure our safety, or at least the safety of those who can afford it. Like many others before and since, Plumwood didn't mince words on this when she wrote that if our species doesn't survive the ecological crisis, then it's probably due to our failure to imagine and work out new ways to live with the world. So while sport might activate people to care for their local places, I'm interested in how our everyday activities, like outdoor swimming, can impact the ideologies that underpin our relationships to the world, to bring knowledge into practice. So clearly my work's aimed at particular groups of people because these ideas are not abstract for everyone. As I conduct my fieldwork in coastal waters, including those cared for by Arakal, Eora, Yagara and Turrbal people, among many others, I remember how my knowledge is always already partial. It's based on injustice, and it's only one of many ways of knowing. Always close to my thinking about how swimming and surfing have shaped my knowledges and relationships are Karen Ingersoll's and Amberlyn Quamalina and Lauren Tynan's reminders that while narratives of building deep connections to water and place are common in activities like swimming, these senses of connection don't give white settlers of British or European heritage like me access to ancestral, cultural or custodial relationships of First Nations and Indigenous peoples. Karen Ingersoll and Dina Gilio-Whitaker's work outlines how activities like surfing, they work as a cultural practice that connects Kanaka Māori and Native American people to their ancestors and to their cultural relationships to place and community. It's the same in Aotearoa, New Zealand, where Jordan Waiti has been illustrating how surfing acts as a cultural practice that connects Māori wave riders to their relationships to people, ancestors and place, their whakapapa. Ingersoll argues that white settler surfers are able to access literacies or knowledges about oceans, but these aren't the same as cultural relationships that First Nations surfers have, especially since so much of my access to swimming in Australia is built on histories of invasion and violence. So for me, to have my knowledges and relationships challenged by swimming doesn't confer me with new rights or authorities in relation to place, nor does it undo the colonial patriarchal power relations that underpin my relationship to place or to swimming itself. Okay, so while there are limitations, clearly, on how far they can take us, I want to understand the possibilities of sports and physical activities in how we come to resituate ourselves as part of ecologies. In this way, outdoor sports like swimming become what Donna Haraway calls making practices. They challenge us to learn about, experience, participate in, relate to, and learn to live with our worlds in different ways. I'm particularly inspired by Haraway's call to resituate ourselves by making kin, not babies, through practices that imagine or bring us into new ecological relations that are different to those of nuclear families. And I also am inspired by Anna Singh's work on world-making practices. To be clear, making kin, not babies is not anti-natalist, it's not anti-mother, it's not anti-family. Instead, it's a call to reject socially and environmentally isolating models of motherhood and nuclear families as the only valuable units of intimacy and care, and to instead think about more than human communities and relationalities. So making new kin, including non-human kin, through the encounters that we have as we swim is a way of making new possible worlds through our everyday practices. I love Anna Singh's sentiment that world-making practices emerge from practical activities of making lives. In the process, these projects alter our planet. Famously, Singh uses the example of matsutake mushrooms in remaking both alienated human communities and disturbed forest environments by bringing these forests and people into new relations with local and global people and economies as different folk pick, sell and eat mushrooms. With this example, Singh illustrates that making worlds is not limited to humans. Each organism changes everyone's world. And sometimes these multi-species world-making collaborations are risky. In Eye of the Crocodile, Val Plumwood wrote about her experience of being prey. In the mid-80s, she was attacked by a crocodile while kayaking in the Northern Territory in Australia. A really isolated spot. Gripped by the thighs and the jaws of the crocodile, she was death-rolled 3 times, and she was really lucky to escape with her life. In this violent encounter, Plumwood experienced the illusion of human nature dualist thinking by quite literally becoming part of the feast and not just some spectator of it. In our everyday life, in rooms like this, we can remove animals and plants, chemicals and minerals that are, in Plumwood's words, inconvenient or dangerous to humans. Since the potential for more corrective and chastening forms of experience has been eliminated from normal life, we intensify and reinforce illusions of superiority and apartness. And Singh also sees potential in being vulnerable. Unpredictable encounters transform us, she writes. We're not in control, not even of ourselves. So I'm arguing that nature-based sports offer productive, discomforting, unpredictable encounters that make us vulnerable. As I swim in the water, I'm suspended above sand and rocks and seaweed, immersed in bacteria, chemicals and pollution. I'm in relation to fish and rays and turtles and jellyfish and other animals. I also swim with ancestors, with spirits and along songlines, along with histories of violence and love. As I soak, I move, breathe and encounter, my presence in the water is an ecological becoming with all the critters that are swimming there too, human and non-human, cultural and technological. These encounters can be external and spectacular, such as with a shark or a dolphin, encountering a shark or a dolphin, or with whale song. But they're also more intimate than that. The bacteria and chemicals we share the water with as we're immersed are absorbed into our bodies. These encounters are part of what Cliff Evers calls polluted leisure. And this involves complex, more than human interactions between human microbiomes with chemicals and plastics and pollution, bacteria, sewage and radiation. Physiologically, the interactions Evers describes are not just skin deep, but they can manifest in our gut and skin microbiomes. This reminds us of the unavoidability of our vulnerability to such exchanges, even in healthy practices like swimming. Yes. We are all the water is, whether we like it or not. Pollution is our kin as well. These encounters make us vulnerable to environmental change as individuals, but we're unlikely to experience pollution without wondering where it came from, the conditions that brought it into our bodies. We can't experience a large shark without thinking about our vulnerability to that. We can't experience pollution without thinking where it came from. And this sense of vulnerability is with us every time we go into the water. Nowhere am I more vulnerable than when I'm in the ocean, in the surf, offshore, immersed, floating, held underwater out of my depth. A body of meat and blood and bones. I'm nowhere more aware of my lack of control and authority than when I encounter bigger than me, with more toxins than me, faster, or which could end my life. Or when I taste the sunscreen in the shallows. As a swimmer, my ocean kin relations are not always idyllic, but these non-human critters are part of my world, as are economies, technologies and politics that shape our lives. So it's this relationality, this recognition, it's this relationality, this recognition of shared lives, our ethics of care that I've found in the water. And of course, this is just one way into thinking this way. In her work on nonviolent activism, Judith Butler wrote or asked, who actually stands on their own? We're all supported by any number of things. Even coming to see you today, the pavement allowed me to move, as did my shoes, my orthotics, and the long hours spent with my physical therapist. The question's not always what ought I to do, but who am I in relation to others and how do I understand this relationship? We're never swimming alone, not really. Instead, we're making collaborative worlds that resituate us in ecologies through movement, curiosity, interaction, accretion, and encounter, even when it's uncomfortable or risky for us to do so. To be part of a collective future is to move the water and to let it move us in return.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for such a beautiful, stirring presentation already. I was just wondering how you sort of navigate the more challenging elements where perhaps the presence of being with or swimming with animals might have an element of disturbance.
So how I navigate that, like as a person or as a researcher?
Yeah, just whether your work, however you...
Yeah, so the shark encounter stuff and jellyfish encounters, in my case in waves, actually in rocks, have been really profound in my thinking. And it was my own experience of feeling really vulnerable in my hometown one day when plumwood came flooding into my brain thinking of crocodiles, and it changed my world. And I think research changes your world all the time. You can see that in your talk today, Taylor. But the sharks are the shark where I'm from, there's been a number of deaths from shark bites and shark attacks. So it's a real threat. It's an unlikely thing that will happen to anyone, but it is very real. And so there's this constant decision and a choice to keep going into the water in the face of these risks that you can't control. Sharks belong in the sea. It's their home. Lots of people would rather they weren't there. Some days I'd rather not they weren't there as well, so that I didn't have to think about them. But I think the main way that the question was, I think, about how do I navigate that? It's a choice to continue to, in the words following Plumwood, to swim into that feast, to know that there are things out of my control, and to swim into it. And there's days when I can't. There's days when I've been on a surfboard and, you know, I know there was an attack a few weeks ago around the corner, and you get this feeling of sharkiness, which some of you might understand what I mean when I say that. And I just go in because I'm not willing to put myself in the way of that. I don't know if that answers your question at all, Eva.
I was also... That's a beautiful dimension, but I was also interested in the reverse of how the human presence could also disturb.
Oh, no, we do. Well, yeah, no, that's fine. So in Australia, we put in nets that cull. Like, by their existence, these nets kill hundreds of animals every year to create this illusion of human safety. And surfers have said to me, I have a right to feel safe in the water. I mean, I fundamentally disagree with that. But that is their position. They're afraid. So we put in these measures to create an illusion of safety in the water. Sharks can swim around these nets. They're just free-floating things that don't even hit the sea bottom. And instead we watch as whales and dolphins, endangered species of sharks, as rays, as birds, as fish, as turtles are caught in these nets and drowned. So we're willing to sacrifice the lives of creatures in their home so that we can have an illusion of safety, and it's a complete illusion. And it is really, these nets are devastating, yeah. So maybe that gets more to it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.